Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council of Universal City, Texas. It is Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. It's now 6:32 p.m. and I'll call this meeting to order and call for a quorum check.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
Here.
Councilmember Buck.
Here.
Councilmember Bulman. Here. Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Here.
Councilmember Najarian.
Here.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Here.
Quorum is present. We shall proceed. This evening's invocation will be given by Councilmember Vaughan. I'll lead us in the pledges afterwards, so please, everyone stand.
Dear God, we pray that we all remember that despite our differences in opinion, we are all striving to do the best for the city we all love to live in. Help us treat each other with respect and kindness. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you everyone for attending this evening. It's a little cooler than it's been. I just came back from vacation in Wisconsin. It was really nice. As soon as we got off the plane back in San Antonio, we knew where we were. The humidity was higher than the temperature. Okay, this evening we have one major topic of discussion. We do have a consent agenda, but the first thing I want to do though is put your eyes towards the screen here, because we had 3 council persons who had the opportunity, and plus a staff member, had an opportunity to ride on the Universal City float during the Armed Forces Parade on Saturday, so or Monday, if you didn't get a chance, or Sunday it was. Yeah, look at see the arms. Okay, let's take a look at this short little video of our council people and staff.
Oh, that's great. Which one's Paul?
represented the city extremely well. Congratulations. Thank you. Fantastic. I tell San Antonio Mayor Ron Harrington all the time, San Antonio is Military City USA, but I tell him it's actually Military Cities USA because we're the watchdog of Randolph, and they know it, and they let us do it. So that's just the thing between Ron and I. Anyway, okay, let's move on to our items this evening. The first item is consent agenda. That's under tab A. All matters listed are considered to be routine by council and be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. And I do have one council person who has asked for item number C, Councilmember Bulman, to be pulled and treated separately. So we have items A and B. If anyone else wants to pull one, please let me know.
Move to approve.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Najarian,
Second.
by Councilmember Buck. Any other discussion? Okay, call for the vote, please.
Just to be clear, it's on.
We're pulling
consent
item
agenda.
C.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Najarian,
Aye.
Councilmember Buck,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby,
Aye.
Councilmember Bulman,
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick,
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Then we'll move on then to the item C that was pulled. It's a resolution, the City Council approving the project for Universal City EDC is authorized by Section 505-158 of the Texas Local Government Code, authorizing certain financial assistance to be used for targeted infrastructure located within the city of Universal City, Texas, and providing for an effective date.
So I just
Vaughan?
discussion,
Move to
yes.
approve.
Motion made, yeah, we'll take a motion and then we'll go. Councilmember Goolsby has made the motion. Second by Councilmember Fitzpatrick. Discussion.
Sorry. So I just wanted to put back out there that I'm against spending money on the temporary parking lot. The city has had tons of gravel parking lots that served a purpose for years. Red Horse parking lot was gravel forever. The field behind my house and in front of City Hall is literally still an unpaved, highly used parking lot for the pumpkin patch. When it comes to fire truck safety, the fire trucks can easily park on either side of the road because this parking lot is so small. So to me, it seems pointless to spend such a huge amount on something that's temporary. The residents are against this huge expense, and I'm asking my fellow council members to reconsider this huge expense and at least get quotes for the cost of a gravel temporary parking lot before approving this tab for a cement parking lot. That's it.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Najarian?
Excuse me, did we decide on having that gravel? I didn't think it was good. We were talking, it wasn't going to be gravel.
No, it's asphalt. I'm asking you guys to reconsider and possibly do gravel as opposed to a permanent asphalt.
Well, in your discussion, you said that, we have plenty of gravel parking areas that we intended to anyway. This wasn't ever going to be specifically a gravel.
Well, she had said that we couldn't do gravel because of the environmental or that it might be an issue, oil leaking into the ground and stuff was well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying we have gravel already that have
This
served
one
us
isn't
for
going to be.
years.
Okay.
But if this was gravel, I don't feel like it'd be any different from the other ones.
Yeah, and you would be correct in that assumption that since it wasn't ever planned on being gravel, I don't see what the point is in that, for me anyway, so. There was one other point, but honestly,
Okay, all right, any other discussion? All right, then we do have a motion and a second, so let's call for the vote then, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby,
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick,
Aye.
Councilmember Buck,
Aye.
Councilmember Bulman,
No.
Councilmember Najarian,
aye.
Councilmember Vaughan.
No.
Okay, that motion does pass. 4-2. All right, let's move on now to our citizens to be heard. As you can see, maybe it's an opportunity, I guess we hit the timer right now, for citizens to address council on issues or concerns. It's informative only. No council discussion or action will be taken. We really do appreciate your participation though, and welcome everybody. There have been 6 of you that have signed up this evening, so I'll call you up in order that you signed in this evening. Please try to keep your comments down to 3 minutes because we definitely have a pretty long session tonight. So first person to sign up is Kim Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kim Hart, 736 Garden Meadow Drive. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, abundance of resources leads to waste. It It does not matter if we're talking about water, electricity, gasoline, food, or the most precious of all resources, time. Or what many consider to be the second most precious, money. Many years ago, my husband and I thought we had worked out our finances. He would give his entire paycheck to the household and keep his bonus check. But in the course of a few short years, as he moved up in the company, rather than giving him pay raises, his employer increased his bonuses very handsomely. It got to where he was keeping over half of his total income. Meanwhile, I was paying for the entire family's medical insurance out of my paycheck, with not much left over for personal or household items beyond the bare necessities. Not surprisingly, he was not interested in renegotiating the agreement. Compared to 20 years ago when the venue tax was first created, our city's sales tax revenues have skyrocketed, even after adjusting for inflation. And with the recent ruling that internet sales are taxable at their final destination, we are likely to see an even greater surge in this revenue stream. If you take no action whatsoever, the golf course and conference center, just like my ex, will be sitting pretty with far more cash than it needs, and probably managing it in the way most people handle abundance of resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, next individual signed up to speak, Mr. Richard Edwards.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Edwards. I live on Trudy Lane. Tonight's discussion about the venue tax. I think we need to remember it's about the venue tax, and although it does involve the golf course, it's really not about the golf course. Whether you consider the golf course to be a profit center, I'll believe that when I see the receipts, or an amenity, which I think that's easy to see. I think what we need to consider is what percentage of the residents of Universal City patronize the golf course and convention center, or whatever we call it. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it better? Because if it's an amenity, and I think that's more realistic what it is. It's a benefit to the city, it's an amenity, it's, you know, it's a place to go, things to see. How many of us actually really go to the parks or the library or take advantage of the dog park? Certainly not the majority of the people. So we're not going to do away with any of those. But at the same time, they're not being specially granted earmarked money. It's worked out in the budget. The council has its say. Emergencies come up. I'm sure we have an emergency fund to take care of that. So as far as the venue tax, as it was set up, was to pay for the bonds to actually install and develop the golf course. This has been done. Yes, it needs upgrading. A lot of things need to be done. But I think that these things should be budgeted in, that the council should make decisions on them. They shouldn't be shackled to a venue tax earmarked specifically for the golf course. I think it should be treated equally as an amenity. I mean, obviously, it's going to require more funding, I would think, than these other items I've mentioned. But these are all things that make Universal City what it is. And I don't think any one of them needs to be specially earmarked, but rather should be deliberated every year and let the wisdom of our council decide how to best fund each and everything. All right? That way, the people who are tired of their tax money being funneled to the golf course can realize our tax money goes to the library, our tax money goes to the dog shelter, our tax money goes to all our parks, and it should. These are civic projects. So it's not like anyone is getting any special consideration. We're looking after the good of the city for the best of the people who live here. And I think that's best done on a yearly basis through budgeting and wise and intelligent council members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. All right, next individual this evening, Mr. Ken Mitz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Ken Mitz. I live at 13410 Adonis. Over $17 million of Universal City sales tax revenues have been dedicated to the golf course since 2004 because of the venue tax. Over the next 20 years, the city will give the golf course more than $40 million in sales tax revenues if the venue tax continues. The city has also given the golf course over $2.4 million in support using general fund revenues that should be paid back from the golf course to the city. The golf course capital improvement needs presented by the city far exceed any potential profits of the golf course. They can't be met without venue tax funding. There are no audited financial statements of the golf course's operations. Therefore, nobody can confidently state that the financial status of the golf course. The council does not receive any regularly reliable financial reports regarding the golf course's operations. If the venue tax was eliminated, the city could give property owners at a minimum a 15% reduction in property taxes. The 2023-2024 budget for the golf course has many questions that need to be thoroughly discussed by council. Several council members and city staff want the golf course to continue to receive the venue tax money so it can stay viable. However, the decision whether or not the city should continue to dedicate 25% of its sales tax revenues to the golf course is a decision that should be made by the voters and not a handful of council members and a few city staffers. I recommend putting the venue tax up for another vote. In reference to the handout here on the venue tax discussion, slide 2, I find it amazing that it's taken over 20 years to implement the ballot language. The last bullet refers to the golf course as an investment. I don't think it's an investment that returns no money. Slide 3, should not avoid elections just because of the cost of an election. And slide 4, priority 4 will never happen because of the golf course needs. Will far exceed any amount of money the venue tax will be able to provide. What about the past administrative costs not paid by the golf course from 2004 to 2023? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mitz. Okay, next individual this evening, Mr. Bulman.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Bernie Rupel, 635 Balboa. We, the City of Universal City and council, has given our city manager an inherited problem. Okay, the inherited problem is in part associated with the venue tax. Now, as hard as she's tried, and she has tried hard, to bring things in line to make essentially us free of venue tax use. Essentially, it's been an arduous task. One of the problems that I see is that we can't buy our way out of this problem. We've got to resolve it. The council members in the past, as early as 2020, essentially avoided looking at the language of the audit report saying there's a problem there. In 2018, same thing. And now we're here again at a council meeting where essentially it is up to council to really resolve the issue. I would recommend that a citizens committee be established to work with the city staff and overlook this. Furthermore, I recommend that our former council member, Mr. Maxwell, would be an ideal person to head this group. Well, his background is actually phenomenal and in this area. And basically, just as a citizen's eye, in order to work to do things, I would prefer a town hall meeting. So that essentially things can be put out for the residents. I just remind council that we have 13% unemployment rate. We've got approximately 15% that are uninsured. Mr. Najarian appreciates the fact that there's the other side of the hand that's not getting taken care of in the city because of his own personal and because of his own personal history things. So we have to understand that you guys are the biblical tax collectors. You guys get to decide whether the widow is going to get taken care of or not. So I thank you very much for your time. Please remember the burden that you place on the city manager whenever you don't give guidance that will benefit all the people in Universal City. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. All right, next individual this evening is Denise Thomas.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. My name is Denise Thomas. I live at 314 Colonial Bluff. And I'd like to thank you all first for listening to me the last time I was here about the overgrown grass in the front of our neighborhood. So I did hear from a couple of council people, well, quite a few council people, I thank you all for that. And I did take all of the comments and everything back to our communities. And they asked me to come back and ask if you could look at ordinance 370Q 2022.
Could you repeat that for me, please?
370Q 2022. And specifically the part that refers to the fire marshal and their input on whether or not the grass is a fire hazard or a hazard to our community, because we believe that it is, and we'd like for the city council to reconsider that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. Appreciate it. Okay. Next individual this evening is Ms. Andrea Williams.
Hi, I'm Andrea Williams. I live at 9210 Cranberry Pass. Sorry, I'm not a very good public speaker, so I'm a little bit nervous. I just wanted to voice my opinion. I think that I personally, as a business owner in the area, that I love the golf course, and I've been there many times and had great functions there. But I think maybe lowering the percentage and maybe spending that money on other aspects of the city, not completely getting rid of what we give to the golf course, but maybe lowering it, that would be my vote on it. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it very much. Okay. Next individual this evening is Ms. Lisa Irwin.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I want to say first that my name is Lisa Irwin, and I live at 12814 El Dorado. I want to say first thank you for the job that y'all do. It's a lot of work and a lot to be considered. What I'm here to say tonight is I've lived in Universal City for 7 years, and it has greatly impacted my family. And I'm here because the community that we have here is very special, and I believe that it's imperative that we try to work together. And this is a small city. It's really imperative that we work together. In 7 years, I have seen a lot of growth. I've seen good things happen here. I've seen all the things, the different venues and parks and splash pad and everything that's gone on in the library, everything they do. And I've been able to enjoy a lot of that. And I'm grateful, very grateful. And so I'm here because I just want to put a light on Universal City with my words. This is a very special place. I know that y'all know that, but I have to say it. And I just want everyone to understand that it's imperative that we work together. And specifically about the golf course, that particular venue offers a lot to this community. It's not just the golf course. It's not just a place to have party or, whatever. That's a place that we come together, and that matters. That place offers a lot for families. It does. And so, particularly for my family and others that I know, we really enjoyed living here. I'm going to be honest, I didn't want to move here. because I had already chosen where I wanted to live, and we had to make a life change because we had a mother coming to live with us. So, and when I met a few people here, I didn't know anybody here. When I first met a few people here, I was very grateful for that. And I told them, oh, I have friends in Universal City now. This is fabulous, because all mine are out of the city. And so I just want to say, that I'm grateful. And I want y'all to hear just from a woman who lives here for 7 years. My life has been changed. It has been. And specifically with people who work for the city. You guys that serve, the EMS people, I don't have enough words to say about them. I'm grateful. And I think we all need to remember something. There's that African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want, I forgot it. Anybody know it? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, those are the individuals that signed up to speak to council. Would anyone else like to speak that didn't have the opportunity to sign up before? Please come on up, sir. Give us your name and address for the record. Can you get it?
Thank you for calling me up, even though I didn't sign in, and as an interested resident. Name is Billy Hill, live on 9023 Phoenix. Happens to be on the golf course, but I don't play golf. I used to watch out all you idiots move that ball around. I've grown an appreciation of Universal City. For 40 years, I've gone to church here on Pat Booker Road. 20 years ago, I moved here to that location. So, and being a business owner and a contractor, I've had the opportunity of working here for Universal City in many aspects, but more particularly, and forget about that, as a resident, I've grown a certain appreciation for Universal City to erase my stereotype that I had decades ago, including the police department and all other administration. I've recently got involved, and as I'm trying to change the way I think and my perception, I try to be more open-minded in many views, including what's on the agenda and what y'all are doing. I'm not smart enough to form an opinion on the golf course or the library or the parks or whatever else y'all want to try to do with the venue tax. And I feel that with 20,000 people that y'all represent, only a small percentage of them vote, and even a smaller percentage of that is educated well enough to form an opinion, particularly if it goes to vote for the residents, for a city vote. My vote's always been important, whether it be Universal City or nationally, that I do the due diligence, that I have time and learn as much about those people such as y'all that are giving all y'all's time and energy to run this city and this council. I meet with some of them personally, and Buck, and some of the old school. And that's hard enough for me to form an opinion, an objective or even a subjective opinion. But that's my due diligence in order to pick y'all to represent me. And my personal opinion, as everybody is stating a personal opinion, that's what I think this process is about, locally or nationally. We're to pick a representative that we trust, that we try to do our due diligence in order to represent me when it comes to certain issues, whether they be legality, whether it be a golf course, or whether it even be the venue tax. And that's my fault if I voted wrong. And whether all of y'all or one of y'all make a decision that doesn't happen to be with my individual personal want or individual personal need, we said it in the prayer to where we need to get together as a community and particularly as a nation to say this objective, this purpose is for the team, the whole, the city. And who are we to sit back and think that we can make a decision or vote to help make a decision in splitting all this up when we don't have anywhere near the accessibility y'all do with past history that you need to consult in order to make a decision in current times, and not just for the next year, the next two, but again for the whole and for the city, the future. And if it pisses off somebody or some of us residents, well then so be it. We'll just vote differently next election for those that rep us. So I just want to get my, say, humble point across to where I love the participation. I love all of the input that we can get from everybody here. And then at the end of the day, it's up for y'all to decide. You're never going to please everybody. I've run small businesses, billion-dollar businesses, and the buck stops here. You call in all the resources you possibly can, and I would applaud all the money that's spent in professionalism and attorneys, and we're blessed to have Vaughan on here for the numbers. And then when y'all pull the trigger, that's y'all's responsibility. So, sorry, but that's not it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. All right, very good. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on then to our items for today. Our business. It's a no tab. It's the venue tax discussion, which is the main reason why obviously many of us are here this evening. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Turner. She'll get it all started off.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I did put just together a small presentation for you. Just kind of remind everybody, if they haven't been here before, where we've come from, where we think we're heading, and some of the possibilities or the tracks that it can take. Do I have to? Okay. Every time I turn around, it's something new. Please stand close to the podium to be heard by the mic. We've got little notes up here now for everyone. Thank you. There we go. So I'm going to start off, these are some of the slides that we've had previously. We've had a lot of information presented by numerous people, myself, legal counsel, council members, residents. So I just kind of went back and took what I thought were some pertinent slides and I put them in here. And of course, the big question is, what is the end goal, right? Because at this point, we don't really know. We've had lots of discussion. Generally speaking, I think from all perspectives, that really the end goal is to figure out how to get as much money as possible into the general fund or into other uses within the general fund that are allowed by law. And then the second goal, I believe, based on our discussion, is that yes, we need to improve and maintain the golf course and the investment that we have. And then the question is how do we do that? So those are really the two end goals that I see for this this continued discussion. So the question on the direction that we take is, what is the direction that we take? So can we accomplish what we want without having to go to the expenses of an election? And when I talk about expense, and I appreciate Mr. Mitz bringing this up, I'm not necessarily talking dollars and cents, because there is a dollars and cents to election, but that cost is split amongst many entities, so it's not just that. It kind of goes back to what I've heard some people talk about tonight. What is the emotional toil that we have on the city and the residents and the council and the staff, and how far are we willing to take that to get to where we want to go? And then the question has to be is, will having the election compound that issue, misinformation, disinformation, misunderstanding, lack of information, and how do you take a very complicated situation and wrap it into one or two sentences so that the average voter can understand the direction that we're moving in or the end goal that we're trying to reach. So that's part of the discussion that we're going to have. So in that, one of the things that we had talked about, maybe it was 2 meetings ago, but really what are the priorities when we're talking about the venue tax? And so I'm just going to reiterate those real quick. Priority number 1 was the golf course interfund loan repayment, which is $1.9 million. And the question was to staff is, do we have the funds to pay that? We are near complete with the audit, and we believe we do have the $1.9 million to pay back the interfund loan. And that will be using the venue tax proceeds. Now then the question is going to be, what are we going to do with $1.9 million? I have several recommendations I could make with it when that time comes. And so we'll discuss that when that payment process comes up. The second priority that we talked about was making the annual transfer of the venue tax to the general fund for the administrative work that is done on the venue project by non-golf employees. And so if you'll remember, the bond council said, look, if you're going to do that, you need to quantify it. So we have, as a staff, spent time quantifying who works and does things for the golf course, their hourly rate, how many hours annually a year do they spend on it, and we extrapolated all of that out, and we came out with, for 2024, we anticipated that would be $310,000. So that would be an administrative transfer from the venue tax into the general fund. And for some of you who have looked at your 2024 budget, you will see that that line is in there. The third priority was that the golf course repairs and improvements, and I'm just going to skip over that for a second. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. The fourth priority was to exercise council discretion in using the venue tax for parks and open spaces. I didn't put the ballot language in here, but as you remember, the ballot language was very complicated, and it did refer to linear parks and open spaces. And the council has looked at that, and they're going to give you some more information on that. So for the 2024 budget, the Parks and Recreation budget is approximately $1.4 million. $1 million of that is operational, and $425,000 of that is particular parks improvements or parks projects, which would be swings and concrete and things of that nature. The operating expense would be more of your equipment and your staff and your herbicides and your grass and irrigation and things of that nature. So those are the four priorities. Now I'm going to pop back to number 3 and talk generally of what we have found out since we had talked last time for the venue projects, upgrade and repair. So I put these in rough order of magnitude, which in the construction world is called the ROM. So one of the things that we talked about was a huge hindrance for the golf course and a security risk is the upgrading of the fiber up to 200 megabytes per second. We're at 100 right now. Everything out there runs slow. It takes longer to sign people in, takes longer to pay the bills, takes longer to process at the end of the night. And so in the 2024 budget, you will see that we did put an item in there under their technology and telephone to increase the fiber from 100 megabytes to 200 megabytes. That's approximately $500 a month difference. And then also the other issue that we have is all of the computers need to be replaced. There are 10 of them, and so we did budget that in the 2024 budget, and that is approximately $16,000 to $20,000 for that one. So we're looking at $30,000 for those critical items right off the top. The second thing that we have been talking about, which is a priority, and it's priority because it happens over and over and over again, and that is we do not have enough parking between golf tournaments, happy hour with tournaments, and all of the other things that we have. I know that a lot of people have gone into what we call the overflow parking. It's not really a parking lot. It's just, we've got some dirt back there, which for the golfers, they don't mind it so much. For the weddings and for the happy hour attendees, they're dressed up. They don't want to be walking in the dirt. So we're anticipating that probably should be done at the top also within the 2024 budget. Then we have the discussion on the activities at the golf course and how there is a conflict between golf and golfers, wedding events and wedding attendees. So I was able to reach out to someone who, for pro bono, did go out and kind of did a rough estimate, or a rough sketch, I should say, of what all of that would look like and where it could be placed and what makes the most sense and things of that nature. So they came back in a couple of phases, and the recommendation was that the new pro shop and the cart barn need to happen first, because you can't make the kitchen bigger without getting rid of the pro shop, and you can't necessarily have the pro shop separated from the carts because of the constant back and forth that they have to have and access to the carts. So that particular budget came out to 2.7 million. Again, that is a new building. It would be about 1,500 square foot pro shop, probably a 3,000 square foot cart barn, same building, because we already don't have enough carts, and we can't get any more carts because we don't have anywhere to park them and they have to be inside. And so that was that one. That does not include FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, right? That is just a construction cost. It was anticipated that if you decided to move forward with that, you're looking at about 6 to 10 months for construction. I do want to caution on the budget for the pro shop and the cart barn, that these are just somebody's off the top budget numbers based on another project that they had done and what they had paid for certain items per linear yard or square foot or something of that nature. And then the event center remodel, which included expansion of the kitchen, new flooring in one half of the facility, inclusion of a bridal area, expansion of the outside deck where most of the happy hour events take place, and things of that nature. That came to about 2.1 million. That did not include most FF&E, and I say most because it did include some general costs for kitchen equipment, but it didn't take into consideration chairs and additional lighting and whatever bar materials might need. So anticipated that that particular remodel, once it got started, would take about 4 to 6 months. Now I say that, all of that, without having any official construction plans, or hiring an architect, or sending it out for a cost estimate. Again, I wanted just everybody to understand, estimate only, expert flying off the top of his head. One was an architect and one was a general contractor.
We shouldn't be trusting those architects though, just saying.
Well, the thing you have to understand. So with most architects and general contractors, they put in these things called standard exclusion. That's when we always say read the fine print. So what did they not include in this estimate that they gave us? Material testing, which would be soil and things of that nature. Design fees, which usually runs about 15% of construction costs. Consultant fees, that is any third-party fees that they might have to have, legal review, things of that nature. Subsurface testing for boring and foundations. Repair or relocation of utilities, because obviously everything is hooked up to the main building, and I'm sure there'd have to be some utility relocation if you decided to add in a new facility. Vegetation, meaning landscaping. Asbestos reports, which always have to be done. ADA review, which is always required. And of course, there's always the big one, any unforeseen conditions. So if anybody's ever built a house or a building or been involved in any kind of construction, even if it's just doing a small project at your house, inevitably you run into something that didn't go right, and so that hasn't been worked in either. So that is what I have for this particular area. Clay popped in behind me. We have Rose and Clay here. They're going to go ahead and just give you a little bit more information, and then after that we'll open it up for discussion. And so Maribel, am I putting their presentation in, or do you have it up already?
I have it up.
She has it up, great. And this will advance us.
And to switch to the next. Thank you, Ms. Turner, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Rose Koneski. I'm here tonight with my colleague, Clay Binford. We are attorneys for McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton. It's the oldest public finance law firm in the state, and I'm a history buff, and I'd love to say that. Clay is your public finance specialist, and I'm the election lawyer on your team. I wanted to review some of the discussion we've had in the past about the 2002 election and the options that are available to us going forward from a legal perspective.
get them to advance. Okay, thank you. Great. So it's been mentioned before, the ballot language from 2002 was actually much broader than the golf course and the conference/event center. It also included linear parks, open space, and related infrastructure, that term being a legal term of art defined by the local government and code. And it includes a wide variety of different facilities related to this project. It could be a store, a restaurant, a pro shop, roads, sewage, things of that nature. The effects of this election was that the tax proceeds can be used to reimburse the interfund loan that Ms. Turner mentioned earlier. The tax proceeds can be used to reimburse the general fund for any of staff's time and efforts used to manage the venue project. The venue tax proceeds can be used for any of the other defined projects from the ballot language that are currently financed through your general fund. So things like linear parks, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment. Importantly for future financing, when the golf course debt is paid off, the golf course and conference event center remains a venue project. If venue tax is allocated away from these projects, they still remain venue projects. And that's important because ad valorem property taxes may not be used to support the venue projects. Here's a quote from the actual law that governs. We may not as a city use ad valorem property taxes to construct, operate, maintain, or renovate a venue project. And in this context, when I say ad valorem taxes, I mean very specifically the ad valorem property taxes under Title I of the Texas Property Code. There are some exceptions that you may hear about that are in play in other cities that are not applicable to us, but we wanted to mention them so that you know about them. This provision does not apply to municipal parks and recreation systems, to watershed protection and preservation, and to certain hotel projects that are financed with hotel occupancy taxes. Let's talk in a little bit more detail about the element of the 2002 ballot language that the city has not used already when it is using its venue tax proceeds. And that is specifically open spaces and linear parks. The ballot language did not define those terms, so we give them their plain meanings. And in the public finance arena, a linear park is well understood as a type of park that is longer than it is wide and is usually running along some sort of infrastructure or scenic byway. And it's intended for recreational purposes. So people are using it for walking, riding their bikes, running. We do believe that you can use the venue tax proceeds for linear parks and open spaces. It's perfectly legally defensible. But we did want to raise for you a small concern that there is always a risk that people from the 2002 election might consider that this was not within the scope of the original project. As an election lawyer coming in, I look at the plain terms of the language. I wasn't here in 2002 and don't know what was in people's minds at the time. So what can we do going forward? Actually, you as a city council, by ordinance, could reduce or repeal any portion of the existing venue tax. I say any portion, but it needs to be in increments of 1/8 of a cent. We, of course, would never recommend that you do that, because if you did, you would lose that income stream. And it might even prompt some other taxing authority to move for an election before you did to fill the gap to get to the 2% cap.
to make sure what you're saying is that if we were to reduce it without reallocating the other portions of it so that we are below our 2% maximum, that is when another taxing entity could grab that remaining portion that we have reduced from, yes?
Yes, so
Okay,
as,
wanted to clarify, thank you.
as a council, you have authority to reduce or repeal. You don't have the authority to repurpose or reallocate in your term.
So in other words, if we decide, if the council here were to determine we wish to reallocate, that being to reduce, let's take an example, the venue tax by 0.25% and replace it with a general revenue tax, that would have to go before the voters of Universal City.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And one of the benefits, if you will, of doing that is that if for some reason that measure did not pass, the venue tax as it exists would not change. There would be a 1-year waiting period before you could try some other type of election. You could try the same thing over again, or you could try some other combination. The key here is that you can repeal or reduce by election if you combine it with something else. There's actually a third option, which does not involve changing the rate at the same election. And that is that you can expand the definition of what your venue project is. As long as you can make a logical explanation for why the new extension is related to the old one. And one of the topics that we have talked about is the aviation district. And that is related to the existing venue in terms of being a community amenity, and it's focused on economic development.
Council could do that without going before the voters?
No, it would definitely also require an election.
Thank you.
That's all that I had in particular for this section on the legal discussion. Are there any questions about where the results of the 2002 election leave us?
Any specific questions about her presentation? We'll start with you, Mr. Vaughan.
Okay. Thank you, Rose. I'm sorry I didn't catch your last name. I was going to butcher it if I tried to repeat it.
That's okay. It's for me easy. Kaneski,
Okay.
kind of a Polish version of can you see?
I might be able to do that. I guess the question I had is, has there been any discussion with the city over which of our parks might qualify as a linear park or open space? Or is it only certain ones? Is it all of them?
Well, staff has looked into that and has looked at some of the numbers that we could use venue tax for these types of parks. I personally don't have a list, but I imagine Ms. Turner does have one.
Actually, I believe we went over our Parks Master Plan with Clay, all of our Parks Master Plans, the ones we have in the past, the ones we have in the future. I don't think there's anything that prevents us from using it in any of our parks.
I think that's right.
Okay.
And you have to also remember that our two biggest parks, Red Horse and UC Park, are also connected to Veterans Park, which is, a 237-acre linear park. They just happen to be your stopping and starting points. The same with the Veterans Park, which is actually right on aviation, the trailhead there. There is a connection. And then also, if you look at most of the parks that we have, they also have walking trails within them as well.
Okay, so I guess in your opinion, could we do an ordinance or a resolution allocating the venue tax that it's already been approved between the golf course and another fund, say a parks fund?
Yes, in fact, I don't think we would even need a resolution as much as that's part of your natural budgeting process. You have funds coming into a dedicated fund for the venue project, and parks, linear parks and open spaces are part of that definition. It's just a matter of your budget reflecting the money going out from that dedicated fund to those departments, if you will.
I guess my concern is that I think I would prefer, and people that talk to me would prefer, that there's a finite amount going to the golf course. And so if we put it in a resolution or an ordinance, is there any teeth to that to say this portion? And if we wouldn't be stuck with 1/8, I guess, if we passed, say, a resolution saying 1/16 is going to go to the golf course and whatever the rest is is to our park fund.
Absolutely, we could do that.
Okay, and then I guess one more question for legal counsel is, and this is not in your presentation, it's probably outside the scope of it, so feel free to, if you don't want to answer it, but we have this parkland that we purchased through Vaughan in the North Lake area that we're looking at selling. And so there's some discussion that if we sell it, then all of the money that we receive from that has to go towards parks. Is that kind of your understanding as well?
I don't think they weren't involved with any of that. I don't think that's a fair question for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so in theory, if that theory is true, then we have a large bucket of money that potentially could be coming that might only be used for parks.
Yes, and that's a
short term.
discussion that council will have to look at when the parkland sells.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from legal counsel on this, Mr. Najarian?
Well, following up with the discussion we're on now, we budget so much a year for the parks. And this is all, what if? If we took a portion of that venue tax to put towards the linear parks, then the money that we originally have budgeted for the parks, what legally could we do with that as far as reallocating it to another, say, general fund?
Right, that's exactly what you would do. So it would be just a push of those monies out to whatever council decided that they wanted to spend it on, whether it was on streets or capital purchases or technology or whatever it was that council decided they wanted to do with that every budget cycle.
And one other question, when we were talking about the money reallocated to the linear parks, that's part of the definition of the revenue of the venue tax anyway.
Yes.
That doesn't require anything to do with ballot. Just making sure.
It's under council discretion to do that.
Okay.
Every year. And let me just back up.
I knew that, but we're getting into some different areas here, and I just wanted to dot a couple I's for myself. So,
Yes,
and I'll cross the T's later.
And then Mr. Vaughn's question from earlier tied into that is that he would prefer to see something more formalized in writing, a resolution or an ordinance.
But that, again, that's the discretion of the council. She's saying you don't have to do it, but you can do it if you want. And it could be, and again, I'm surmising, that one of the reasons that the funds, proceeds before were not used for parks is because all of the proceeds were needed to pay off the debt service. Remember, the debt service ballooned toward the end. And so all of the venue tax was just used for regular repairs and maintenance and for the debt service. This is the first year, really, when you actually have the option as a council of using some of the venue tax proceeds for parks or administrative transfer or whatever else is legally advisable.
Clay, did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that. Clay Benford with McCall wanted to add in that you're asking really a couple of questions within that one singular question. One, can you use the money for this purpose? And two, how would you document it to bind potentially councils on a future basis? And we would have to bring in your city attorney to see what scope and magnitude could you actually do and how much would be required to go through your formal budgeting process. But as Ms. Turner said, what would happen is you would use money from a dedicated source for a purpose that can only be used from that fund, and then that would free up money on the other side. And now as you reach capacity because of the growing tax revenue, you are growing into flexibilities that speculatively, maybe that's why the ballot language was as broad as it was at inception, that maybe one day you could do stuff like this.
And just real quickly, one more question since we're on this already. By shoring up the language on there, you said you can or you don't have to, but it's up to the council. What's the good benefits about shoring up that language?
Well, I would say the benefit from that is to provide certainty where the statute was, or the language before was ambiguous and left to your discretion. So if you exercise that discretion, you start building the factual predicate on which you make your decision. We determined that linear parks include these parks because of the attributes that Ms. Turner just described. And therefore, that pairs with the authorization back in 22 to justify the expenditure.
And I would think by shoring up that language, getting it all legal and making sure that everything is I's dotted and T's crossed for future councils and everything, it gives them a much stricter and more defined guidelines for.
Sure, and you figure that every time that you use an undefined term or an undefined concept, you create ambiguity. And that ambiguity remains until someone steps into the void. What you were doing in this scenario, again, because you've never done it before, you were exercising your discretion that is reserved to you as council, and then memorializing that.
And then also remember that if it is done by resolution or ordinance, that it doesn't mean that sometime that a future council can't come back and revise that should they so choose. I'll give you an example that I think everybody can understand. So we recently passed our fund balance policy, right? We didn't have one. We discussed it for a while. What are we going to do? How do we want to handle it? It's basically the same thing. You could call it a venue tax use policy if you didn't want to do it as a resolution or an ordinance, but I'll let Megan weigh in on that.
Stole my thunder. So, exactly. So when we're talking
$200.
when we're talking about the funds and shoring up definitions and shoring up potential uses, it is for this council's use, because in the future, if the council decides they want to go a different direction or want to interpret it differently, there's going to be very little to restrict them or prevent them from that. But by passing a resolution or ordinance separate from the budget process, my concern would just be to ensure that the numbers in there are correct. Because if we're talking about going with a percentage, and then I'm sure Claire Rose may bump me on this one, but if the budget of the city for that year doesn't meet that percent for what we're calling qualified expenditures, then the council or the city may find itself in a different position of we're now dedicated, and we can always go back and repeal a resolution or ordinance in the same manner, but just adopting it or using your budget process to identify what is an eligible expense when we've combined potential administrative costs with specific park projects, just allocating that annually in the budget, which is adopted by ordinance, gives that direction to staff and you all for the upcoming year. And that is something that's reviewed annually, kind of what's been mentioned before about being able to review annually where those funds are going would be a great benefit to the council.
Just one more. Since you said that too, and again, just to clarify it for me, probably everybody else has a few steps ahead of me, but I want to make sure for the future discussions. When Councilman Vaughan was talking about putting in writing a specific amount, like a dollar figure, versus a percentage of whatever is made that year, you might not be able to, if you put in a dollar percentage, you might not be, there might be some years where because of budgeting and the way things come in, you might not be able to meet that, versus keeping it as a percentage to where it's whatever it is that year, that's what it is. Am I making any sense whatsoever? I am in my mind.
So like, I think the example was like a 16.
Yeah, I think you're saying you wouldn't want to do a dollar allocation, but a percentage would be better, I think is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, for budget, that's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you.
So if the city takes that amount out of the venue fund and says we've passed a resolution or ordinance and we're going to dedicate 1/16 to those eligible expenditures, and then the remainder, if the total cost, you get a project delayed, you got to do extra environmentals, or it took longer than we thought to get the project materials in or equipment ordered or anything like that, then you're rolling it over into the next year. I think that would be my only concern, but I will leave that to the finance experts as far as how you're going to track and keep an account of that separate and apart from anything else that's in your parks budget that is not falling under what we've defined our terms to be.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So what she's basically saying is it may not be in the best interest to hem yourself in, but to actually be more flexible and look at it every year. If that is what you decided to do, then we would need to a little bit change up our budget process and have that general discussion prior to our budget meeting to identify what council believes would be an appropriate amount to take from the venue tax to put into parks and administrative transfer.
Well, Mr. I think that you said it best, to provide the flexibility, but with the certainty and specificity that Councilman Vaughan is looking for, a policy that is adopted by council that provides direction, and then you would apply your typical financial conservatism, probably to build up a reserve fund over time to identify that O&M is paid for out of the general fund budget and capital improvement out of the transfer, so you're not caught with a budgetary shortfall. And we're going to model based off last 5 years average historical collections on a prospective basis and dedicate not more than X percent and Y percent to these particular purposes. And so if you do all of that, you provide, and again, this is all new because you haven't had these flexibilities, then you modify the policy in a year if you're a little bit off, but you have a roadmap that you're starting to apply to give yourself the certainty you're looking for.
Ms. Knutsky?
And
Mr. Bedford,
Mayor,
I said that right,
point out that Mr.
Yes,
Mr.
Thank you very much.
Goolsby is advising me that he does have a question when it's his turn.
I'm done, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Najarian, I
I'm
apologize.
done, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Buck, I think was next.
I'll yield my time to Mr. Goolsby, sir.
Mr. Goolsby.
Thank you all. First off, I really wish I was there because I would have jumped in about 5 times, but it seems like every time I was ready to jump in, y'all answered, basically answered my question immediately. So I'm really good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Well, actually, I like the idea of 20 years ago, the council was telling us that it was kind of ambiguous as far as the language that's in it, because it allows us to use it on our park system. Had they not done that, had they been very specific and hemmed it in, we would have been in a much different situation today. Right now, what I'm hearing is that we have this ability this year, because this is our first year without having to repay anything, but that we have this opportunity this year to use that money for other parks and even infrastructure to parks. So I'm kind of excited about where we're at. I know that, that the idea of what Councilmember Vaughan is saying is that we'd like to put a limit on what goes to the golf course. I think that's up for further discussion. I'm not sure how much of a limit I would like to place on what goes to the golf course, because who knows what happens year after year. But again, this is brand new for us, having this opportunity. And what council said earlier is that that's what the budget session is for. It's year after year you update what you're going to do. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Phil, you want a quick comment?
Yeah, just one more question, just to put 2 more bullets in the death horse. So in Ms. Turner's presentation, she had one of the options she had was the parks budget, which was $1 million in operations and $425 in park projects. So you're saying all of our parks qualify. So would you say that all of the operational budget, all the park improvements of our existing park, probably not a new one, I'm guessing, I don't know, but that could be venue tax eligible?
It's legally permissible.
So yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Knutsky, Mr. Binford, I echo the comments from my fellow council members. Thank you for coming out tonight. Do you have the original ballot language as it appeared in 2002?
I don't have it in my presentation, no. It was in the last presentation, if you have that one.
Admittedly, I should have copied it down and had it available.
Give me 1 second, I may have it.
Perhaps while you look that up, I would like,
All I remember is it using a lot of comma and grammar, setting up.
is there any way that we could display it on the screen, or maybe you could just read it out for everyone?
That I do not have, I'm sorry, I just printed out the slides from the previous presentation.
Would you mind reading it?
Was it reading?
Ms. Kuneski?
I would be pleased to. Adoption of an additional 0.5% local sales and use tax to be used by the city to reimburse the cost of a municipal golf course and conference center, to provide for funds for financing of said project, to provide for open spaces for public use in the city of Universal City, Texas, based on linear parks and improvements, for payment and reimbursement for a municipal conference center and golf course, including related infrastructure, designated said project as required by Chapter 334 Texas Local Government Code for the purpose of financing the venue project.
Thank you, ma'am. Could we use our sales tax revenue to pay for all of those rough orders of magnitude that you presented? General revenue taxes. Could we use money from the general revenue fund to pay for all of those items that come from sales tax, not from ad valorem property tax? Understanding that we can't use ad valorem property taxes to fund anything related to the venue. Could we use the money from our 2% sales tax that is designated as coming from the general fund?
For what you mean on a pay-as-you-go basis?
Yes, sir.
So you would have,
For instance, I'll give you an example. If the golf course and event center said that they would like to build that pro shop and golf cart, and they wish to have an allocation of $1.9 million, I think is what, $1.9 million, could council approve an allocation from our general revenue sales tax in order to fund that pro shop and golf and cart barn?
I would say on a pay-as-you-go basis, yes.
Very well. Could we also pay for the parking lot improvements?
Yes, all of those are owned by the city, and the prohibition is that you would not be able to use ad valorem taxes.
Very well. I'd like to read a paragraph from the Hoffman history, certainly not an authoritative source, but it's a very well done source of historical information about Universal City. It's where I took all my history lessons from for the first year of my time on council. The golf course, for various reasons, this is from 2002, didn't generate the money expected, yet the bill still had to be paid. The council swallowed deeply and then went to the public to ask for a half-cent sales tax increase to cover debt service and principal interest payments for the course. The half-cent could mean an extra $360,000 a year. The voters obliged, in a surprisingly low turnout for so contentious an issue, by a margin 316 to 146. While you say that, and I'd like to add a little bit of context here about my perspective on all of this. I support the golf course. I want the golf course to get the pro shop and the cart barn. I want to add potentially the wedding venue. I want to get the carpet redone. I want to remodel the kitchen. I see a difference, however, in the residents' eyes between perfectly legal defensible and appropriate wording in the way that we are allocating this money. I don't think it's an argument that the principal reason for initiation of that venue tax in 2002 was to repay the bonds that were issued to fund the construction of the golf course. That was the principal reason, and with whatever money was left over, because the golf course wasn't even funding its own operation, much less repaying its debts. So council went to the residents and said, we would like to allocate a half-cent towards the operation of the golf course and the repayment of the debts. The reason that I asked council 2 weeks ago to support adding this discussion onto the agenda for this evening is that I believe there is a difference between perfectly legally defensible and asking the residents for their approval to continue allocating this as a venue tax. If we were to reallocate this to the general revenue fund, we could absolutely continue funding the golf course. But we could also look at several other priorities that are possible within the city. We could still fund the linear parks. We could still fund all of those other projects that we've discussed here without having to look at different ways to manipulate our accounting of how are we going to legally, defensively argue that we can spend it like this, as opposed to simply putting everything in the general revenue fund and then asking council to set its priorities for funding the city's operations over the course of the next fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other specific questions of councils? Okay. Thanks. All right, again, we have, this is a purpose this evening is the discussion. So there's a couple of our council people I haven't heard from. We can continue the discussion. Ms. Bulman, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to answer like Kim Turner's actual questions that were in this slideshow, she asked, can we accomplish anything we want without having to go to the expense of an election? And my personal opinion is no. I just believe that the residents should get a vote and they should get a say in what they want to do, because I feel like it's bigger than the city council's decision. I'm not anti-golf course either. I don't think anyone is. I think I like Councilmembers Buck's idea of putting it in the general fund, or 1/8 goes to the golf course and 3/8 goes to the general fund. I like the idea that that money is a little bit more fluid and earmarked, because while yes, we can sit up here and say, well, we'll have flexibility and then we can put it towards linear parks if we want or whatever, but I've sat on council, I've watched council for a couple of years, I know these people and how they vote, and I just feel like they're always gonna fund that golf course no matter what. And so I think that's unfair to the residents. They won't get a say at all. It will just always go towards, these are the things we want for the golf course, and I feel like that's really unfair. Watching budget season, very rarely does someone bring something up during budget season and say, no, I don't want this in the budget. I'd rather have this. So for me, I think that we can't do this without the residents' say. And if the residents decide they want the full venue tax to go to the golf course, awesome. But I think they should get a say, and I think my preference would be to move it all to the general fund so that everyone gets a fair slice of the pie. And that way, when we discuss whether we want to fix the cart barn or whether we want to have a bridal suite or whatever, we can pull that from the general fund as opposed to pulling it from a venue tax. So that's basically where I lay on it.
Okay. Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, I think I lay it slightly differently. I support the golf course, but I also appreciate the fact that this is the first time that we've had the opportunity to even allocate this money. It's always had to go pay for debt. We've never had the flexibility to discuss where else the money could be allocated. And each year, the sitting council would have the ability to consider what the needs of the community are, where this money could be allocated, and not have it go straight to the golf course as it always has. There's flexibility that's already exists in the language, and that the people that have elected us and have said, we trust you to make these decisions, we can, on an annual basis, help allocate where that money is spent. Knowing that if it is spent someplace else, at one of our parks within the language, that will free up money for other projects. So I think that the flexibility exists as it stands right now. It's the first time we've ever had the opportunity to make those, have those discussions and make those changes. And I would hate to rush into a decision. We always can take this back and vote on it later. I don't think there's any need to vote for it. I think the flexibility is there. You've got council that's helping to guide those decisions, and I think the people have trust in the council to make those choices.
Okay, anyway, a little bit here. Austin has no idea what they want to do with property tax. It just started their second session. I think my personal opinions were a little bit premature in trying to make a decision now. If Austin can't even decide what they want to try to do, because that will clearly affect municipalities, there's no question about it. One is a homestead exemption, one is having this Attorney General and Governor, they don't agree, the Senate and the House don't agree, that's why they're back in the second session. I'm just afraid that if we make a decision now on what we would like to do, basically we have next week, as we start this budget cycle, if you want to entertain some of that discussion, I think that's very, very appropriate. I think we're all in agreement that the course is critical, it's an asset, we have to find creative ways to support it. If we continue on right now, remember, this next year, this 2023, it is already allocated, right? Okay, we're looking at 2024 and beyond. So I would caution us to be very careful in trying to come up with something that the council believes that they want to do now when we still have plenty of time to look at it. And I know we've beaten this together, and I think a lot of the discussion has been very helpful. This is, as Mr. Patrick says, the first time we have a chance to look at it where it's not been used to pay the debt. So we do have some very, very, very potentially good options available to us, every one of us. And we all have our own personal feeling on how that might want to be when we want to see that allocated. And that's what we're here for. We're here to have intelligent discussion and make that decision as a council. And I strongly support all of that. If you want my personal opinion, I think we have the wherewithal here with our staff and with legal counsel to make those decisions without needing to go to the voters. If we decide we want to, that's fine too. I just personally think that we have the ability now, when we can look at this venue tax as since it's not paying off the debt, we now have a way to look at potentially reallocating it where we don't have to get approval by someone else to do that. So that's my humble opinion on where we stand right now. But I'm just very, very cautious about making any decision, any action on behalf of this council when we don't even know what Austin's going to do. I think that's critically important for us to know what's going to happen there. And I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. So that's where I stand right now. I totally agree with the fact that we have all kinds of latitude now. We have plenty of opportunities to take a look at what we want to do with this money. And it's not small change. And now we know we have the ability to move within the system to allocate this. There's just too many variables that I don't think we should be overly ambitious to try to do something right now. I think we have plenty of time to make this decision. We've got a full year already where it's set. Yes, we have plenty of needs. We have plenty of needs in all places around our city. All places around our city. So there's my humble opinion for you all as where I stand. I think we need to be very careful and cautious about waiting till we find out what Austin's going to do, and we can take it from there. Yes, Mr. Vaughan.
I'd just like to I still feel like we should be working towards a solution, because I think we're kind of split here. I think we have, and this is my sense, but I think we have 3 council members that are interested in calling an election and 3 that maybe aren't interested in calling an election. So we're kind of divided. And I think they've presented us with an option where we could both win if there's a compromise. And one of those could be split into venue tax into some to golf course, some to a parks fund through an ordinance that has some teeth on it. And it frees up money for the general fund that we can use for whatever that we want. That also protects us from Austin a little bit, because then if Austin does something, it's going to impact our general fund. It's not going to impact the golf course. So that's where the golf course
It could clearly impact the Valorem though, big time.
Right, and that would hit our general fund.
Yeah.
So that's where we would need that extra flexibility. So I think that's something that I would support working towards. If we worked towards some kind of ordinance that had a split, a percentage split that maybe we could all agree on, then that would help us to some extent. If whatever we pull out of the general fund into this separate new dedicated park venue tax fund would not be for the golf course per se. We could have a portion that stays in the golf course, and that's something that we could discuss and hammer out, and something that like stays for parks that would free up money from the general fund to help other things. So I would like to see if my council would be interested in exploring that further.
I have a question. Oh, wait,
Yes,
just a second.
yes, ma'am.
So, okay, but if you do that, if you say like 1/8 is gonna go towards the golf course and 3/8 is gonna go towards the parks, then you have to put all that money in the park though? Is that what we're saying? Like then all that money would have to go towards parks?
It depends on how much whether, get to Megan, I'm gonna put my attorney hat on. So
Yep.
it depends on what we do. Do we do a resolution? Do we do an ordinance? Is it just a budget allocation that we do on an annual basis? That would be the only real teeth to it. But it would have to go to parks, because those are really our only two options now, is parks and golf. And then, however,
And then transfer.
that would be something that the golf course venue tax would pay. So if we give them an 1/8, then maybe that 1/8 could pay the admin transfer if it wants to. But then whatever we put in the parks fund would be for the parks. But that would essentially get you free money because it's all general fund. So you can't be spent on anything. Because if we're already spending this much on parks every year, $1 million,
I got you.
then moving that to another fund gives you $1 million in general fund that you now have to spend on anything.
Then I support that. I think that's I think that gives the residents a little bit of that comfort that they would like, that it's not just all going to the golf course and it earmarks some money aside that's not just for the golf course and it's a guarantee for them, as opposed to it just being, well, yeah, council's gonna make sure that, we can maybe do this instead. Instead, this makes sure that this amount is going to the golf course and the rest is going towards something else, freeing up that general fund. So I support that.
Okay, good. Let me get Mr. Goolsby. Did you have something, Barry?
Oh, I love you. I like what Councilmember Vaughan had to say. My concern still is that we would hamstring ourselves. I'm happy to go down that road because I think he's definitely onto something. This is our first year to not have to pay back this loan, so I'm excited to see where it takes us. I agree with him that this is a good idea to get something down. I'm not sure what you mean by teeth, honestly, as far as more of a directive or a direction to push us versus something that says, oh, heck no, you can't do that because that's going to be that would be 12% of this budget, and I know you needed it, but we're not going to do it. So I am a little curious as to how that part goes. If any of that makes sense, I'd love to hear a reply to that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I refer to back everybody talking tonight on citizens to be heard. Everybody had something fantastic to say. Got a little bit out of everything. And I've been somebody, since we have Bear as the new mayor pro tem, it seemed like only yesterday I was elected to this council, and now I'm the old man, the elder on the council. We talked about this thing a lot, and I talked to a lot of people about the golf course and the venue tax. And as a matter of fact, up to about a half an hour ago, I'm still getting email as far as on views of what to do and what not to do. And a lot of it is, when I first started out, I was totally against touching any of that money, period. But as time goes on, we listen, we get together, we work together, as Mrs. Irwin would say. And we all want the best for this city. We just have different ways of getting there. And once I started seeing the dollar signs and everything else, I even got on board with being able to reallocate these funds and be able to come up with something that when I was elected, as everybody, every council person says, when we're elected, we want to represent all the people. And that's what I want to represent, is all the people, not just some of the people. And I have a lot of people that are letting me know, you know what? We elected you and the council to do a specific job. We're trusting you with the city in the future, and the vision of the future, and this is, you know, this is something that not only do we, you know, we have the power to do that we're elected to do, doesn't need to go back to the voters. We have everything we need right here to make responsible decisions year after year. Even Mr. Edwards, you know, you and I don't agree on things all the time, but the council should make the decisions, the right decisions, being smart. And you're absolutely right about that. I don't believe this is anything that needs to, we need to do our job. As council people, we need to do our job, put our heads together, and come up with something that's mutual, a mutual decision that is beneficial for everybody in the city for now and in the future.
I feel like we're trying to do, right? Like, we've been trying to do this for 4 meetings now. Like, can we get there? I guess that's the residents. Like, can we come to an agreement tonight? Can we come to an agreement?
Yeah, yes, we can.
I mean, that's my hope. Like,
yes, we can.
Okay.
But I'm also somebody.
Well, there's no coming to an agreement tonight. This is a discussion.
Yeah.
But yes, we can. We're all smart people up here, and we can do what's good for the benefit of the city. Now, what number that's going to be, we might have to have other discussions on there. As far as rushing things, I think that is, again, that's just short-sighted. I lost my train of thought there.
It's well said.
Representatives, as Mr. Hill said, Mr. Representative should represent. That's what we were voted in to do. And this particular, and what Mr. Irwin came up with. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's exactly it. I would hope that this council would have vision of the future, not just what's going on right now, and what vital source that venue as the golf course and the convention center, the importance it has to this city for the future. We need to do it right. We need to come out with some out of the box thinking, but it's not anything we can't do. It's nothing we haven't done before, and that's what we're tasked with doing. So to answer your question, Ms. Bulman, as far as what are we going to do, we need more discussion. My whole thing is this whole thing was brought up tonight, whether we're going to end up bringing it to a vote for getting out on for a vote with the public down the road and getting verbiage for that. And that's something that I don't think we need to do. We need to take care of it up here. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor, can I
Yes.
just
Yes, ma'am.
ask a real quick clarification? When we're talking about adopting an ordinance, and I think that was part of your question, the budget is an ordinance. And the budget is an ordinance council passes every year and amends every year as needed throughout the year, depending on the needs and the costs that have come up. So are you asking about that separate apart from a policy, or would that be an ordinance you would want to see in the future in addition to a policy and separate from the budget ordinance?
I would separate from the budget, because I think the budget's a 1-year expiring ordinance, is that correct? So after 1 year, it would revert back to its traditional purpose, I would assume.
So any ordinance you adopt can be repealed by any council at any point in time. So I feel like you're attributing more longevity to an ordinance separate from the budget, just because it doesn't have a termination date like the budget ordinance.
Correct, and I'm just attesting to how hard it is to get anything through the council. And so if we pass an ordinance, it would take a pretty good movement to try to get that changed. If it was a point-in-place ordinance, not a 1-year expiring ordinance, then you have to get 4 members to agree to even discuss it, and then another 4 members to agree to change it. So I think it would have a little bit more teeth. That's what I would support more so than the budget ordinance.
You can do that in a policy as well.
So
you can do that, like in the fund balance policy, it does take a majority of the council members to agree upon that.
As long as that's the requirement, then that would be fine with that.
Yeah, I see where you're going, yeah. And one of the reasons we're bringing up the whole issue on the ordinance is, and I apologize, we're having a discussion separate from the rest of you, is that you have to remember, if you start down your budget process and you have a certain amount of funds that went to the venue project and a certain amount that you put to your general admin and to parks, and then halfway through the year you decided that the golf course venue project maybe was doing well and it was making money, you can still make your budget adjustment during the anytime during the year and say, okay, the golf course looks like it's going to make blank and it won't need this amount, so we'll make a budget adjustment and put more money towards parks. I just want to remind you that you have that flexibility during the budget year as well, if in fact it looks like the venue project is doing well, or if you did a construction project or something with the portion that you left with the venue funds and they didn't need all of it for that year, you could decide, like Clay said, to put that in the reserve fund, because you know every project needs to have a reserve, and the golf course in the fund balance policy is required to carry a 6-month reserve at some point. Or you can adjust your general fund budget and specifically your parks budget and put more money into the parks. Just want to remind you that you have that option as a council.
So that would be like what you're saying, like what we talked about earlier today, like that 1.1 million that's in building maintenance for the golf course. You're saying we could take some of that money out and put it towards something else as a council.
The parks.
Or the parks, because we don't really have anything specifically earmarked necessarily for that huge lump sum of money.
Correct.
Okay. But then you have to have a council that agrees to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, according to his policy that he's asking for, it will probably require a majority vote of the council. And that would be a 4-3 vote. So you have flexibility at each budget cycle, and then you have flexibility to amend your budget as you go through your budget year.
Absolutely. Just speaking of the budget,
And of course, all of that will be flexible, which the discussion that we haven't had yet, and that is, you know, any improvements that you decide that you want to fund it and give a time for the venue project.
and that's why the budget session next Wednesday, a week from today, is on. And I invite all of you to come in.
Right.
Because it's really interesting.
So for the, again, going back, so those who've already looked at the budget that we've given to them, and we thank all of you that have and that will, we've already built some expenses in there. And as Ms. Bulman pointed out, when we met with her and went over the actual budget itself, we didn't know what to do with the venue tax. So we picked some low-hanging fruit that were priorities, and we have funded those within the venue tax budget. But we did have $1.1 million. We don't have any direction from council, so we don't know what to do with it. So we just left it in building projects, so it's just sitting out there. If you had a consensus this evening for staff or some direction for your staff of what you would like us to do with that 1.1 million, we can have all of that adjusted before we get back to you next week.
Okay, but this is a discussion on venue tax. Would that be appropriate?
Well, it's.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, I think she's talking about for budget, the venue tax component of the budget.
Oh, okay.
So you're just giving staff direction that you'd like to see some numbers crunched or some categories reallocated and put back into your presentation next week.
Yeah. I'm not sure we get all 6.
Again, just direction, it's only direction that's going to happen from this Wednesday to next Wednesday.
Right.
Knowing that we have $1.1 million in the venue tax that is not allocated for anything. If, in fact, you had a number that you wanted to put towards the Parks and Recreation budget, your staff would need just some direction now to make that adjustment before next week, and we would come back with it in our budget presentation. Mr. Goolsby has his hand up.
Mr. Goolsby.
Thank you. In that ballot language for the venue tax, it referred to streets and utilities that access the linear parks and things like that. Could that 1.1 move in that direction?
So what street do you need done inside of?
That's a great question for Randy.
Yes. So we don't have a lot. We may have an entrance that goes into our park, but they're not necessarily what we're working on at this point. If you're actually thinking that you're gonna do a street that just happens to be out in front of a park, that I don't think is legally permissible. If you're talking about repaving the road that goes from the entrance and circles around all the baseball diamonds and then goes back, that is a related infrastructure, but not just a
Okay,
street
so it's not-
that happens to be out front.
Okay, I was hoping that it was related to streets that access the park, not just the park streets, because not a lot of our parks have streets, right?
No, you, go ahead, Clint.
Yeah, I think that you have all of this is based upon a rational basis as to what you can use to justify the expenditure. There has to be a nexus, there has to be a relation. The further you get, the more tenuous that nexus becomes. At what point does this council no longer feel comfortable that the expenditure is related to what was actually approved and included in the ballot? Things that are near and close proximity, those would certainly, I think, would be fine, particularly if it is specifically related to access, ingress and egress. I think that you could certainly make an argument that says every street in town is somehow connected to the entrance to the park. That is certainly something that I would be comfortable advising would be okay.
Understood. Thank you very much. I just was hoping for some clarification.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely support looking at establishing a policy of some sort to actually put some guidance behind it. One of the things that has struck me is that I don't think we're opposite. I don't think it's 3 to 3. I think we need to look at, it's the first opportunity that we've had. This is a great discussion and dialogue. I know we have the guidance from the comprehensive plan that was presented a few years ago that might identify opportunities that we could actually take input from the citizens in the community and allocate those funds according to what was identified as priorities by the citizens and then voted on by council. And I know we've discussed the possibility of doing another one that would give us more up-to-date guidance. And so I think we're gathering all of the information to really help us to make those decisions as we were elected to do. And I don't think there's a hurry to put it on the ballot. I think we are very empowered with the tools that we have available to us, and we just need to look at the information that's there and let that help guide us in our decisions.
Real quickly, if we're talking about direction, we've got the 1.1 million. I would suggest, since it's something that's been brought up that would be important down the road, is putting that towards is it possible to put that towards the debt to the city from the golf course?
So we believe now that there is sufficient venue tax proceeds to cover the $1.9 million debt. So we're going to come back with a proposal for you to just pay that off and be done with that portion. What we're really looking for, at least what I'm looking for the staff guidance, for fiscal year 2024, next year, the $1.1 million in venue tax that we have not identified for a specific project. Is there a portion of that you would like us to put toward Parks and Recreation budgets?
I think I'm sorry. Do I still have the floor? Yeah, I would think with the discussions that we've had as far as possibility down the road of taking this venue tax and putting some towards the linear parks, and that would be a beautiful place to start with the 1.1 portion of it.
Right, okay, so I talked a little bit about the golf course, the upgrade and the repairs. So obviously we know that is going to require some engineering plans and construction drawings and a look at utilities. I don't know how much that's going to be. Maybe Mr. Goolsby can weigh on that. I said that's usually about 15% of the estimated construction project, which at this point looks like it's about $550,000 to $600,000. If the council wants, we can leave $600,000 in that particular project in order to start on those plans in fiscal year 2024. And then when we get to budget year 2025, have a better idea of how to make the improvements to the golf course based off construction plans, not just based off somebody's, last time I did this project, it was this amount. I'm just throwing options out there for you, understanding that you may not be taking that into consideration.
That's also a good idea too. I mean, I'll make everybody knows my position on discussions I've had with other people in the city, and I would like to see money spent on, money spent on the golf course as far as making it a fantastic venue event for and a place that a lot of people outside the city, a destination spot. So when I look at the numbers, that it's kind of like the pro bono you got. I like the direction it was going, but then it says a new building for the golf carts and the
Pro shop.
and the pro shop. I'm like going, yeah, that's nice and everything, but I want to see a nice new venue, something that's going to bring in. So, in other words, that's great, but I want to look beyond that. I want to look at something that's going to be bringing. A lot of people say, yeah, how many people from Universal City actually use the golf course? Well, I know it's a small percentage, but the golf course that the Universal City has and the venue that it has is to bring people from outside of the city into our city to spend money. And for a destination spot, like I said, I like to start where these plans are going, but I want to see more. And so I think that's a good start of being able to come up with those plans and us as being able to work out a way of being able to support that financially in the future. So I'm sorry, I took more time.
No, it's okay. No.
I don't think we'll probably be able to give you a number tonight, unfortunately.
Okay.
But what I would propose is if there's a way that if we could draft a policy and if we could all come back to the next meeting and maybe give you a number at the next meeting about maybe what we would think about the allocation for next year or what the allocation should be going forward. I think part of my issue about giving a number now is because I don't know that I'm sold on the plans that you have for the golf course. I want to support the golf course and the event center, but I don't know that I want to. It seems like we're tailoring it for the weddings, and I think that's not necessarily the direction I would like to see it go. Maybe the rest of my council would disagree with me. I don't know about that, but I think I would want to see that vision where we're going before we say let's spend $500,000 on the engineering. So what is the ultimate goal, and how are we going to get there? My preference would be we come to an agreement on a percentage split that then the city would work with that percentage that they've been allotted with some kind of teeth to it from the council that's probably not going to touch it in the near future to figure out how you would use that to finance those projects that you would like to have on the golf course. So I think I've heard at least four that may be amenable to a policy or considering a policy.
Which would include a percentage rather than?
Right, a percentage of how much do we want to go towards parks and how much do we want to be for the golf course. And maybe the city can give what their estimate is, like what they would need from the percentage to try to accomplish some of the goals they'd like to do over the next few years.
Would that help as a direction for you as we finalize what we're going to do next week?
Well, okay, so the policy won't be next week because it's just a budget work session. So that's why I was hoping to get some direction so that if staff's going to have to go back and make a change to the budget, that we do it during our budget work session when everybody is here and at that particular meeting. But if you do it, have a policy in place, then it won't actually affect the 2024 budget up until the time when we come back in, I think it's late August, maybe it's early September, when you're actually approving the budget and voting on the tax rate.
Of next year.
So for us, it's really hard to go back in and figure out what the tax rate's going to be if we don't know what that number is going to be for the budget itself.
But if you said we think a third, let's say, of venue tax would support us for the next 5 years, Maybe we can say, okay, let's do that in the budget now and bring us back a policy for a third, and then we can all approve that, assuming we all agree, or whatever that.
The other option is, again, always trying to remain flexible, not only for this council, but for the future council. I know when we talked about the fund balance policy, Mr. Buck was in favor of a range. Maybe it's a range 25% to 35% or something of that nature. We can do that too. Again, we'll leave the blanks in and y'all can figure out what you want to put in.
Okay. And that's what we do next week. Yes, ma'am.
Because I think that's where I'm struggling to is when I looked at the budget and where we're at for the golf course, it appears that, you know, our number one and the thing that we make the most money off of is golf. Like that's our big thing. It's a golf course. So I have a hard time too with some of these improvements. Like I'm all for expanding the parking lot and for some of this, but I'm not for all of it. So it's hard to hash out like how we're going to do that now if we haven't even discussed it at budget season. Does that make sense? So I'm like, how are we going to hash this out when we haven't even hashed it out yet through budget season? What we do want to fund, what if there's things that we don't want to fund, and I think that's why kind of it all comes back to me in the sense of like it's really, really hard to change a budget once it's already out there, and it's really, really hard for council members to be like, well, I don't want to do this, I do want to do this, but not everyone's going to agree. That's why I think having that fee of this has to go towards that, this has to go towards that kind of forces the golf course to make some harder decisions as opposed to just giving the golf course everything it wants. Because this is already, not that these numbers are accurate, but this is already like $4 million worth of improvements to the golf course in the next 10 months in total, so that's...
No, that's the construction period.
Okay.
That's not the time period. It could
Okay.
be, the
So it could be
construction could
longer.
actually be 3 years from now.
Okay.
It's just a planning. They said once you start construction, that is the time period from when you
Okay.
start to construction when
Construction
you
finish.
finish. Yes.
So that's my thing is like it's a lot of money and it's hard to rein that back in with just your council. So like I said, if there's a way, you don't think tonight we could come up with a number that we could just all agree on that would be like 25%, 35% for the golf course and then the rest goes towards parks?
Or we could do this, you don't give me a number and I'll just split it.
Okay, I would even be okay with that.
I think that's probably more feasible.
And I'm talking about the 1.1 million because we know that
Yeah.
it's projected to be 1.7, but we've already identified specific critical uses for some of that. With the 1.1, with a non-identified use, if you wanted, I could just split it and take, what would that be, 550,000 and put it in the parks, and then we leave 550,000 unbudgeted in the general fund, and then when we get to the budget session, then you can have the decision on how you want to use it, or if it's sufficient.
I would be for that.
I would back you up on that.
Wow.
I think you have a consensus.
I'm looking at everybody. I don't want to move until
I think that's going to be the easiest way for present when we meet with the budget next week. Everybody good with that, sir? Okay.
I'm looking at Phil.
On a policy. I think it's great for next
We'll
week.
still work
but
on
yeah.
a policy, but we already know that the budget process is going to start before the
Sure.
policy is ever reviewed. And then I have to make the assumption when we put the policy up that y'all are going to agree on it, which doesn't necessarily always happen.
That's very true. I think Councilman Buck was here before and said that he really wants a vote, and I think that I would like to see that happen at some point. Maybe we can wait till after budget season and we can take a vote to split it. But I would like to have some kind of consensus that we all do want to see a policy. Let's bring it back and we can discuss it and iron that out. Maybe
I'm
separate
going
from
to
the
get you a
budget.
policy. I'm just asking for some direction for next week's budget cycle.
50-50.
Let's start with 50.
Let's 50-50.
Okay, I'll jump in only because you brought me in, Mr. Vaughan. I don't know that a policy is necessary. We do this via the budget process. When we say, we as the city council, in allocating the money for the budget, we approve a certain amount that's going to go to parks, a certain amount that's going to go to the golf course, and that those funds that can be used from the proceeds from the venue tax will be used from the proceeds of the venue tax, freeing up the other monies into the general fund, and then those projects that cannot be funded using the proceeds from the venue tax will then come straight from the general revenue, proceeds from the sales tax and from the ad valorem property taxes. I personally don't support a policy that says we will allocate this much to the golf course, we will allocate this much to the parks. I think it's unnecessary. That comes in the form of our budget decisions up here, allocating the money as it is appropriate on a year-to-year basis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Goolsby, do you have anything to add? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, you sure did. I'm sitting here trying to put my thoughts in order, and that's going to take till next week. My problem is I can't see Councilmember Vaughan to read his body language to understand exactly how happy he is with where we're at, because I always look to him when we start talking numbers. So I just can't see him.
Phil, can you
You wanna walk
come
over
up
there
here
and
in his seat? He's gonna run down to this end.
Here, you want to sit next to me for a second?
He's moving so you can see him. I apologize, I didn't realize you couldn't see
Chinese
him.
fire drill, city council meeting.
You don't get your hand out.
I know, I guess it is. No, I'm not thinking, I'm not sure if we're talking about a percentage that you have to spend. I'm thinking it's a range. I like where you were headed with, it's a range of anticipate spending between 25 to 35% is where I thought we were headed. I didn't know if you were saying that you're going to spend 35% of your budget. I don't think that's where you were headed. So I'm not sure exactly where you were headed today.
Well, I'll just clarify then that it's a split of the revenue coming in. So every venue tax dollar that comes in, 25 cents goes here and 75 cents goes here. And then it just accumulates in those funds. One would be the golf course fund and one would be a linear park fund. And so then we would have however much is in there, we would spend that however we see fit in those funds.
And if we're talking about a year that where we wanted to upgrade the conference center, that when we had ample funds in our linear parks, we're okay to move that money with council direction in the budget process to pay for an upgrade to the conference center. Is that?
Well, as we said, if it was a policy, then council could override the policy and say we're going to do this instead by a majority vote. Yes, that would be possible. But I guess the goal would be to say both sides would live within their means of what we've allocated.
Yeah, I like where we're headed. I like this direction a lot because it is kind of where your prayer was going was let's work together, and I'm happy to. I think we're headed in the right direction.
Okay.
Okay, we all agree prayer works, so I'm praying that there could be some direction for next week's budget cycle. You all have your budgets. Do you want me to make an adjustment to the parks budget with venue tax?
Yes.
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 I'm saying yes.
Split it 50-50 for now, and then we can hash it out.
And now I'm looking at Goolsby.
I think we've already come to basically.
50-50. I like the 50-50 idea.
All right.
Understanding that we're talking about 1.1 million.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Got your direction, Jen?
Yes, I have direction. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right. All right, everybody, it's 8:30. Anything else? Okay.
Got some more comments or?
This concludes our business session this evening, so I'll turn it over to the city manager for her comments.
Budgets.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it very much. If you remember that we sent it out to you, if you would please take a look at it. Some of you have already made appointments. If you need to make an appointment, obviously Christine Green and I will make ourselves available to you. And we're just looking forward to a good, robust discussion on the budget.
Very good.
That's all I have, sir.
Thanks, Jen.
Other than, I'm sorry, one more thing. I did want to thank both Regina and Sam, where are they? Yes, in the back of the room. For one, getting the Armed Forces Parade ready for the city and for making sure that the city is well represented, and for doing all the running they did up and down the Riverwalk to get that video and that photo done. I think Sam said, wait, you did about 6 miles that day.
They used to have some young people on staff, right?
And then very quickly came down and one day put that video together. So I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge their efforts and their talents.
Thanks, man. Awesome. Okay, Phil, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that we met with Ms. Turner and Ms. Green today to go over the budget. We got a lot of our fact-based questions answered, and we're hoping that this next meeting won't be a marathon like last year. And so we've asked Ms. Turner to have everybody here to answer questions, but not do a round-robin presentation. So if that works for you guys, I hope that works out. And if you have questions, I would recommend that you ask them so we can try to focus on what we want to talk about, what our questions are, what we might want to change, and not have a round-robin presentation. And then lastly, Ms. Thomas got here tonight and spoke about her issue, and I think it's something that we should consider. Just to give you a little bit of background for those who are not familiar, there's a lot in front of their property that has fairly tall weeds with some vermin in it. Our current ordinance for the property maintenance code says that property has to mow 100 feet around all edges, but the fire marshal has overridden that and said it only needs to be 25 feet. And that's a separate paragraph in our ordinance that allows him to have that authority to do that. And currently they don't have, so I've been told, a way to appeal that process because they're not the property owner, they're the adjacent property owner. And so I'd like to see that be on our future agenda to consider maybe removing that fire marshal exception on the code so that the 100 feet would stay in place and it would prevent some of the issues that they're having. Is there any interest in discussing that?
I would only caution, sorry if I may, Mr. Mayor, I would only caution what second and third order effects would that have for other properties in Universal City that enjoy the same large lot aspects and would then be required to mow or clear a lot of trees, for instance. The property at the corner of Athenian and Centerbrook comes to mind right off the top of my head. The property formerly affectionately known as Junkie Joe's comes to mind. Would that then have the effect of requiring those other property owners within Universal City, the one adjacent to the animal hospital, the flight exception, or what would we call it, the exclusion zone for the flight possible crashes? What would that do to those other properties and require them to do the same things and potentially have to cut down a bunch of trees and clear the property in order to be in compliance with that? That's the only thing I would say.
Well, why trees?
Yeah, why trees?
I
can't have a
Okay, sorry.
amongst us on these items.
Yeah, can we have a discussion, I guess? Yeah, okay. So I'm for a discussion.
Yes,
Okay.
Sure, we can have a
Yes,
discussion.
Okay.
that would be, okay. I'll agree with Ms. Turner. Bear, let's go with you.
I'm sorry,
so
so
we
the council
don't forget.
discussion is that you do want that on a future agenda?
Yes.
I was going to, during my presentation, bring that up, so yes, I'm for that as well. If that's what you're looking
I think that council's consensus is to do that. Okay, Bear, I don't want to forget you, so let's put you up next.
All right, thank you. The only thing I would ask is that the fire marshal be present for that discussion.
Absolutely.
If possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One, the river parade is fantastic. I remember whenever I was on that parade, that was so much fun. I'm so jealous that y'all got to do that. It looked like a great time. Thank y'all for putting that together. It was great. Second, thank y'all for allowing me to Zoom again. And I want to thank all of those who reached out with well wishes and prayers for everything I just went through. And I am doing great. Just can't sit down for very long. So thank y'all for your patience.
All right, thanks, Bear. Appreciate it. Yes.
So budget workshop is on the 12th, but Councilmember Vaughan and I are going to have a guide your council July 9th from 2 to 4 p.m. Sorry, on the calendar. It'll be Sunday. We're going to have a Sunday before the Wednesday meeting like we always do. So Sunday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. we're gonna discuss that budget, we're gonna hash through it, I'm gonna make it as simple in terms as possible. We did meet with Christine and Ms. Turner, that way we could get a lot of those questions answered for you guys. We're gonna break it down a little bit more simple, and then get residents' feedback on what they would like to see in the budget, what they would not like to see in the budget. I implore everyone who's interested in budget season to come on Sunday, that way you guys can really have your voices heard and what you're interested in. You can also email me, council4@uctexas.gov, on your opinion on the budget season, but I'm just asking anyone who's interested and wants to give feedback on the budget process, July 9th would be awesome, so I could hear what you guys have to say, and I think that's it.
Mr. Buck?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Had a great time on Sunday the 2nd in the River Parade. Thank you especially to Sam and Regina and Kristen for putting it together and organizing, and I know it's like herding cats. I know all the pain that you guys went through trying to get everybody on the same sheet of music, so thank you for doing all of that. A couple significant dates coming up here. I'd like everybody to know that today is National Graham Cracker Day, so when you get home, have a graham cracker if you got one. A little more interesting, tomorrow is International Kissing Day, so those of you that have somebody to kiss, please do so. But also, we have Movies in the Park coming up on July 15th at the Universal City Park. Right after sunset, we're going to be watching Lyle Lyle Crocodile. Invite everybody out for that. I will be in person at the budget workshop on Wednesday the 12th. I will not be here in person on the 18th, so I will request the ability to Zoom in. I will be headed to Colorado for my daughter's wedding, which is the Saturday following that. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I got.
That's a good priority.
I think so. She thinks so too.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too enjoyed the River Parade, and yes, this year Regina got to stand for a little while instead of running around, and Sam, you're the man. You did a lot of running around. You were real good at getting these things together, and I'll tell you what, you did some. You had some fantastic pictures out there too. So I just appreciate it, and the city appreciates it too. There's the veterans, the personnel out there, everybody on the Riverwalk. It's just a fantastic event, and you know we've been part of it. We did miss you, Bear. We did miss you. That's something that I look forward to every year when we can, and something fantastic for the city and everybody all around. We did bring up the thing with Ms. Thomas, which I wanted to further on, and yes, we do need the fire marshal there. You said we would make sure we got him there. Everybody, and I want to say this sincerely, everybody that got up tonight for citizens to be heard, we all do hear you, but tonight was, I got a little bit from everybody that stood up. Again, I'm a real believer in we all want the best for this city. We all just have little different ways of getting there, and the togetherness and out of the box thinking and everything we can get together is just going to make for a better future. So I really appreciate everybody coming up, what we do, and thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
thank you.
Thank you. I very much enjoyed being a part of the parade. Kudos to Sam and Regina and Kristen. They did a great job getting us corralled, and it was a real honor to represent the city. And I know that people were excited to see anybody in the parade. We got lots of really positive attention. It was a great experience. I appreciate all the comments everybody made tonight. We do pay attention, we do hear. I appreciated all the emails that I got on the venue tax discussion. I think all of that is great, and thank you for letting us know what you think. We appreciate it. It really does make a difference. I wasn't going to bring this up, but because Councilmember Bulman brought up the Guide Your Council meetings, one of the things that I remember previous to being on council is Mayor discussing the fact that we don't talk about things outside of these meetings, that all of the discussion occurs here on the dais in front of everybody. And I am struggling, especially with this last weekend, I think, where there was 3 council members actually talking about the agenda in not an open meeting act. And I think we're just really going on precarious territory, and I just urge caution. I want to make sure that, anybody can email all of us. You can email us all the same thing so that we know what you are thinking and we can have that information come to us. I just want to make sure that we're all getting the same information and we're not talking about the agenda outside of open meetings. There's a reason why that act exists, and I just urge caution. That's just my personal opinion, and I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for the discussion this evening. Thanks to the attorneys for attending and giving the presentation, Kim, as well for summarizing. I invite all of you to come to the budget workshop, which is next Wednesday, and it starts at 5 o'clock. At 6:30, 5 o'clock. I want to make sure that the number on. But I appreciate everybody's participation this evening. That is what council is all about. To listen to you all, and I appreciate your comments as well, sir. Coming up, we haven't had a chance to meet you before, so I appreciate you coming to council meetings. And those of you that are regulars, thank you. It's very meaningful to us, very helpful to us. As Paul mentioned, it does not fall on deaf ears. We are very proud to be able to represent you up here, and it's not an easy task because we have to represent 21,000 of you, and we do that humbly and proudly. So thanks for attending this evening. Thanks everybody else for your participation. This meeting is now 8:45. Adjourned.